Good morning, everyone. My name is Alana Vega, and I am the Kids Count Coordinator for Advocates for Children of New Jersey. Thank you for tuning in this morning to hear some of the latest data impacting the children within New Jersey's largest city, which is the city of Newark. We are happy to have you all watching this presentation, and our report is available on our website, which is www.acnj.org. We would have loved to have seen everyone in person, but given current health concerns, we are glad that we have this as an alternative. I do want to announce at the top of this call that if you have any, this video, if you have any questions, please type them into the comments and we will do our best to respond to them in a timely manner. So before I get into the data, I'd like to acknowledge the support that we've received from various foundations for this work. The Annie E. Casey Foundation funds the National Kids Count Initiative. And for those who may not be so familiar with Kids Count, this is a national initiative that exists in all the 50 states, as well as U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And it's an effort to use data to track the well-being of children. And ACNJ has been the New Jersey grantee now for many, many years. We produced several different Kids Count reports looking at state, county, and local data. And through the support from the Prenatal Foundation and the Victoria Foundation, we have been able to produce a Newark Kids Count report every year now for several years. And support from the Victoria Foundation allows us to produce our annual special section within the Newark Kids Count report. So we've looked at a number of different issues over the years, including chronic absenteeism, childhood lead poisoning. And this year, you'll notice that within our report, we have a special section focused on the 2020 census, which we'll talk more about at the end of today's presentation. I do want to announce if you're looking for more data, you can check out our website, acnj.org, and click on this Kids Count badge here on the homepage. From there, you can navigate to our other data reports to look at other information and other resources that we have. We've also produced maps this year, so that will also be located on our Newark Kids Count page. And there will also be more information here on the scrolling marquee about the release of this report. Another resource I want to make folks aware of is the Kids Count Data Center. So the Annie Casey Foundation maintains this site, and you have the ability to view data state by state. We upload our own Kids Count data for counties, as well as some indicators for the city of Newark. National Kids Count also produces their statewide figures, so you can compare that state to state data, and you can create custom data reports, which is a really great feature. It's a great tool, and I really encourage those who are listening to utilize it. A bit more of housekeeping before I get into the data. I want to stress that these are not ACNJ's data points. We utilize strictly publicly available data within our report, and we get our data from a number of different federal, state, and local sources. At the federal level, much of our data comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, and then at the state level, we do get most of our data from the various New Jersey departments. And then when we put together local reports, we also get data from local school systems as well as the police department. So the value of Kids Count, though we are utilizing publicly available data, is that we take all of this information from very different sources and put it into one place so that you don't have to do the legwork and go and find all these different sources. So that's the value of this report. So with that, I'll start going over some of this year's data. As you can see here, as of 2018, Newark's total population was over 280,000 residents, with close to 70,000 of that being children under the age of 18. And here you can see a racial and ethnic breakdown of the city's children. Roughly half of children under the age of 18 are Black or African American, and 22% are some other race. Only 4% were considered non-Hispanic white, and then 45% of the city's children were Hispanic or Latino. I do want folks to recognize that this chart reflects the separate reporting of race and ethnicity for the purposes of U.S. Census data. So what does that mean? If you were to add these percentages, they would total to more than 100%. And this is because Hispanics can also be other racial groups because Hispanic is considered an ethnicity separate from race. The only exception on this slide is for white non-Hispanic. So you really want to look for that level of specificity. If it says something non-Hispanic, that means that Hispanic Latino individuals have not been folded into those numbers. So it's important for us to keep these things in mind when we're looking at different data. Another interesting trend, you can see here, 10% of Newark's children were foreign born. And this compares to 6% of children statewide. Though Newark does have a larger percentage of foreign-born children than the state, I want to point out that the majority of children, both within the city and statewide, were born here in the United States. However, 47% of births in 2018 were to Newark mothers who were foreign-born. So that means more than 2 out of 5, or really close to half of all births in 2018, were to women who were born outside the United States. I highlight this statistic because this really has implications for direct service providers when it comes to service delivery. And according to National Kids Count, an immigrant family is considered to be one in which at least one parent is foreign born. So another way to look at this data is that more than 40% or 47% of all of the infants born in 2018 in Newark were born into immigrant families. So looking at a trend that has continued from prior years, median incomes for families with children continue to rise. For Newark, this went from just over $31,000 in 2014 to close to $40,000 in 2018. While this progress is promising, Newark families continue to earn less than the state's median income for families with children. Newark does continue to experience higher rates of poverty than both Essex County and the state overall. In 2018, 36% of Newark's children lived in families earning below 100% of the federal poverty threshold. In 2018, 100% of the federal poverty threshold for a family of 4 was about $25,000 of annual income. And of course, this federal poverty threshold is applied unilaterally to all 50 states and does not account for different costs of living within those states. So what we like to say is more indicative of those who struggle to make ends meet within New Jersey is the 200% of the federal poverty threshold measure, which for Newark was 63% of children under the age of 18. Now, going back to that poverty measure, one of the most significant costs to families, especially those living in New Jersey, is housing. And in 2018, you can see that 55% of Newark households spent 30% or more of their income on rent. This means that they have less money to spend, less of the remaining income to spend on other necessities that they need. Please note that while Newark residents spend a more significant share of their incomes on housing than do Essex and New Jersey, the rates at which folks spend too much on rent is high at all levels of geography, though it is more acutely felt in the city of Newark. Looking now at infant and maternal health, we see that fewer Newark mothers begin receiving prenatal care in their first trimester than mothers in New Jersey overall, as well as in Essex County. Just over half of Newark's expectant mothers began receiving critical health services in their first trimester, compared to more than 70% of New Jersey moms. Related to this measure are higher rates of babies born with low birth weights in the city of Newark. So roughly 11% of babies born in Newark in 2018 weighed less than 2,500 grams, compared to 7.9% of all babies born in New Jersey. Looking at child protection data, we saw a decrease in the number of children receiving child protection and permanency, or CP&P, supervision overall from 2015 and 2019. Moreover, the number of Newark children in out-of-home placements has continued to decline and currently is at about 679 children. So the majority of children within the city of Newark are receiving CP&P services through in-home supervision. Another trend that we saw was a really significant decline in the number of registered family childcare providers. So these are providers who offer care for children in their own homes. So since 2015, there has been a 74% decline in the number of registered family child care locations within the city, with data as of 2019 showing that fewer than 50 providers operated in the city of Newark. Licensed child care centers also saw their numbers decline during this time period, but the decreases were slight and not nearly as significant as those of the registered family child care providers. A positive trend we saw was that more families are receiving services through New Jersey's state-funded home visitation programs. In 2019, 386 families interacted with a home visitor, connecting at-risk families with essential services to provide healthy environments for their children and for their families. Looking at some of the education-related trends, we continue to see an increase in the number of students enrolled in charter schools. In the 2014-15 school year, that number was just below 14,000 students, and we're currently at over 18,000 students enrolled in charter schools as of the 2018-19 school year. And you can really see that sort of trend of increasing enrollees in Newark's charter schools. Looking at an important predictor of academic success, we have here our chronic absenteeism rates by grade. One thing I want to reiterate is that a student is considered chronically absent when they miss 10% or more of enrolled school days. And this does include excused and unexcused absences. As you can see here, students in pre-K and in high school experience the highest levels of absenteeism. I do want folks to note the jump in rates between 8th and 9th grade. That's something really important to keep an eye on. And I had mentioned this is an important predictor of academic success, and I think that the reason why is very much self-explanatory. A child cannot learn and cannot benefit from school if they are not in school. So this is a really important metric to focus on. Looking now at data impacting teens, we continue to see declines in teen births across the state. So this is for teen births ages 15 to 19. And for Newark, the trend has been less consistent than the statewide trend. So you can see there's a lot of fluctuation with a lower percentage in 2018 than in 2014. But please note that in 2017, the number was lower than that for 2018. So we did see a one-year increase between 2017 and 2018. We should continue to monitor this figure, but the fact remains that there have been drastic reductions in teen births over the years, and that is something certainly to celebrate. Another case of declines we've seen is in the number of juvenile arrests over the last several years. Currently, the number of juvenile arrests in Newark is 329 compared to 489 in 2014. And it's important to note that the number of juvenile arrests did increase between 2017 and 2018. Also important to note is a breakdown of who is arrested. So here you can see that of the 329 juvenile arrests in 2018, 85% were to males. And we have more data about the juvenile arrest breakdown within the report, so please check that out. So now that concludes some of the data from this year's report, but I do want to take some time to discuss the information in the special section of our report. And if you have any questions relating to the first part of this presentation, again, please include them in the comments to this video, and we will do our best to answer them. So, a couple important things. You may have heard some rumblings about the 2020 census, and it is here. So last week, households began to receive their invitations to complete the census online, over the phone, or by mail. So why does this matter? There are two big reasons, and the first is funding, and the second is political power, although there are many reasons why it's important to complete the census. We need accurate census data to ensure that New Jersey has its fair share of funding for important federal programs like Medicaid, SNAP, WIC, and Head Start. And you can see within this report some data on the number of children that receive benefits from these programs. So it's really critical that we're making sure we have accurate data to ensure that we have the resources that we need for children. And it's estimated that in fiscal year 2017, more than $45 billion came into the state of New Jersey using census data to allocate funds for important programs. We also need accurate census data in order to determine how much political power we have. So our voting districts are drawn using census population figures. The number of representatives we send to the U.S. House of Representatives is determined by our census counts. Some folks may remember that many years ago, New Jersey at one time had as many as 15 congressional districts. We currently have 12 congressional districts. And some folks may remember more recently that after 2010, we actually lost a congressional district. So we had 13 congressional districts prior to 2010, and we are now at 12. So census data really do impact our political power. The and more reason of why census data are so important, we need data to plan for our local municipal level functions. We need to know how many people are in an area so that we can make sure that our roads can sustain the population, so that we can ensure that we have enough hospital beds. There's so many reasons why this data is really critical. Another thing I want to note is that certain groups historically have been difficult to enumerate for census counts, and this includes people of color, immigrants, and many other groups, including children under the age of 5. And I want to point out that children under the age of 5 are actually the most undercounted age group in the census, and we can discuss that more towards the end of this presentation. So within this year's report, we have included several different maps, and these can also be viewed on our website. These maps look at Newark's 2010 mail return rates, meaning the individuals who submitted their paper forms via mail during the 2010 self-response period. Other maps also look at concentrations of specific populations that have been flagged as difficult to enumerate based on information from prior census years. So this is really meant to be a tool for folks to target resources when it comes to census outreach. It's important for us to get a sense of where perhaps foreign-born individuals are located within the city, so that we can make sure that the information going out to those parts of the city are really targeted towards that audience and answer questions that they will be most likely to ask. So again, these resources are on our website, and I encourage folks to check them out. So I had mentioned that young children are the most undercounted age group, and it's estimated that in 2010, we missed more than 2 million children nationally in our 2010 census counts. And what's really concerning is that research has shown that the undercount of young children is getting worse. So you may be wondering, well, why are kids so often missed? Why aren't children counted? The primary reason appears to be that the person completing the questionnaire left the young child off the form. This often stems from the fact that young children are more likely to be living in what are called complex households. So an example of this might be a child living in a multi-generational household or living with unrelated individuals. And this really puts them at greater risk of being missed in responses to the census because of confusion in those scenarios as to whether or not to include young children. So what are the implications of this? What does this all mean? We really need to encourage people to complete their questionnaires, of course, and respond to the census, but we also want to encourage people to accurately enumerate those living in their households. So this will really involve educating and empowering residents with information about the importance of counting young kids. You need to think of it this way. A 1-year-old in 2020 will be 11 in 2030, the next time the decennial census rolls around. If we miss a child now, they won't be counted again until they're almost in middle school, which really renders them invisible for most of their elementary school education. And if you think back to some of those programs that are impacted by census data, it's really critical that we make sure we have an accurate count of children to ensure that our children are receiving their fair share of resources and their fair share for these important programs. So I want to clarify a term that some folks may have heard, which is hard to count. In our report, you'll see figures like 96% of African Americans are considered hard to count. this does not mean that 96% of Newark's African-American population were missed in 2010. That's not an undercount figure. This is a metric that is used to predict risk, and it is based on the percentage of households who mailed back their census forms in 2010. So areas within the city and the residents living within them were considered hard to count if fewer than 73% of households returned their census forms in 2010. This is the basis for some of those hard to count figures you may have seen either within the Newark Kids Count report or on the City University of New York's hard to count maps. Recently, researchers at the Population Reference Bureau within the last several months created a new metric, and what their data show is that 2010 mail return rates, so that's the hard to count measure, as well as the Bureau's low response score, which is a metric that was developed by the Census Bureau to predict sort of hard to enumerate areas, are really not good predictors of the undercount of young children. Oops, let me go back. And so why is this? This is because of the reasons I just described in the previous slide. Many households who returned forms in 2010 did not include their young child, right? So looking at data that reflects mail return rates isn't going to accurately capture those households who might be at risk of not counting their kids in 2020. So these new data, which you can find at the website listed at the bottom of this slide, looks at different factors to approximate where the risk of the undercount of children would be highest. Some of the factors they looked at, and there's a more detailed methodology on their website. Some of the factors they looked at were child poverty rates, the number of children living with grandparent householders, the number of adults in an area that lacked a high school diploma, and several other factors. And so here you can see that all of Newark, based on this metric, is considered to be either high risk in this sort of green shade or very high risk of an undercount of young children, which is the blue shade. So I encourage folks, this is not in the Newark Kids Count report, but it's a really useful resource, and it really highlights the risk associated with young children in this upcoming census count. So please check this out, and you can look at maps across the state, not just specific to Newark. So you may be wondering, okay, I get it. It's really important to count children. What should I be sharing with people? And the three things you want to remember and sort of your elevator pitch about the census is that it's easy, it's safe, and it's important. It's easy in that there are three different ways to respond, and this is really important to stress, particularly in light of current health and safety concerns surrounding COVID-19. You can still, and you always have been able to complete your questionnaire online, over the phone, or by mail. And all of this can be done without ever leaving your home or interacting with an in-person census enumerator. The questionnaire can be done on your own schedule, and it should take about 10 minutes to complete. The census is safe. Census Bureau staff swear a lifetime oath that prohibits them from sharing personally identifiable information with any federal, state, or local agencies. They cannot share the data with ICE or HUD. They cannot share it with local law enforcement. They cannot share it with your landlord. That is protected. Census Bureau data are only released after 72 years. And you may be wondering why. That is how we are able to review records on sites like Ancestry.com to get a sense of our ancestors and more information about them. But again, apart from that after 72 year release of data, the data is protected. And a Census Bureau employee, if they were to violate this law, which is Title 13, they could face a $250,000 fine and or up to 5 years imprisonment. And this is really an important thing to underscore for different communities. And the Bureau has an excellent fact sheet on their website about the census and confidentiality, and it's available in multiple different languages. Really great resource for folks to utilize. And lastly, the census is important, and I stressed that at the beginning of this discussion of the census, but I want to underscore that accurate census data ensure that cities like Newark have their fair share of resources for important community infrastructure and supports for things like schools, hospitals, and roads. So it's really critical that we're sharing this information with our networks, with our family and friends. Remind them that they can complete their census. Mailers have started to go out, but also that today, March 18th, is National Count All Kids Day, which is a day that we want to underscore the importance of making sure infants and toddlers count in the 2020 census. So please share images on social media, share posts, and please use the hashtag #CountAllKids. It's really critical that folks understand they should be counted and they should make sure that their young children are counted as well. So with that, I encourage you to submit any questions in the comments. Please feel free to email me if you are interested in more information, and follow us on Twitter using @ACNJ4Kids. We're always here to answer questions. We're happy to be a resource. And should you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please continue to submit your comments and questions. We are really happy to help. Thank you, and everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and let's make sure everyone counts in 2020. Thank you.